point, war mode off. And if you want to be invited, I'll put a thing into the group finder. Let's see. I guess this is considered PvE, so I'll do pre-made under PvE, Dungeons and Raids, Custom, and I'm going to call it Read Aloud with Aster. So if you want to join, I put it up into the LFG, so you can come sit with me if you want. And I'm going to be in this cute little, like, secret gem. This is like a hill. You get a beautiful rain view. It's storming. It's a stormy night here in Pandaria. And beautiful view. And inside, I just love all these little details. The little scarecrow and this box of artifacts. And if you look really close, you can see like the fruits inside the baskets. There's a skull right there. I love the attention to like little details like that. And Kitten says, oh, I remember that place. I love how much detail it is. See? Kitten, you understand me. Me too. I love the little details. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot. It's like the fact that my cat pet can sit in my lap. Like, it's the little things that just make me just excited, because especially when you put your heart into the game, it feels good when they add things like that, like little treasure troves. So I'm gonna sit my character on this. This looks like a pillow, right? This looks like a bag of rice or something. I accidentally masked the spell. Don't mind me. Let me get my cat out. And it's story time. Story time. It's raining out, so you guys can get a little bit of a rain view. Yeah, right? So you got the rain, you got the nice sheltered, we got the lantern going. It's a stormy night, perfect day to read a book in Pandaria. So, let's begin. Let's begin. So, if anyone wants to follow along, this book is available on Kindle. It's called Sylvanas or World of Warcraft by Christie Golden. So, today I feel like reading, so I can't say exactly what days I will be reading, because if I'm in PvP mode, then today I was in the mood to read, and I'm happy you guys are here to enjoy this book with me. So this is the prologue. Sylvanas Windrunner stood at the top of the steps for a moment. She was not sure if the young king passing within the runic circle below would become future prey or future partner. It was all up to him and her. You will not succeed, the young lion had once said, definitely as he knelt before her. It was ludicrous. It was a ludicrous statement. Anduin. Don't you love the name Anduin? Oh, like, I love the name Anduin. I was like, I don't know why more people don't have that name, but I just love that name. Dr. Trey says, I'm comfy. Hello. Yay! Yes, get comfy. Have some hot cocoa. It is raining. When it's raining, the best thing to do is to take shelter and drink a hot beverage and enjoy a good book, right? Kitten says, Anduin is my heart, and he will be my lover forever, right? He's a hero, obviously. Let's be real. He has definitely a heroic personality. Anduin Wren was held fast by chains woven of dark magic. He had received the worst pain the Maelstrom were capable of bestowing, yet he had not broken, even managing to summon the light in this place of cold, shattered misery. Through everything he had endured, Anduin retained a desire to help and heal, even if it meant his own suffering. And that display had intrigued the jailer, he who ruled the realm of torment, he with whom Sylvana had allied. So this is going to that time period. So the jailer is the one who caused all the havoc in Shadowlands. He's the one who partnered with Sylvanas. Him and Sylvanas were working together for a very long time. And so it's kind of showing you the prologue to what's going on in the world, because there's so many different books. So it's really good that they have the prologue so you can kind of understand what time period it's happening, what has occurred based on the events that have already passed. The jailer wanted to use this shiny new weapon immediately, but something had stirred within the Banshee Queen, something she couldn't quite explain. Was it hubris that compelled this desire to see her greatest enemy swayed to her side? You've seen what he can do when he believes in the cause. Their first encounter had not gone well. She hoped this one would yield better results. The jailer had granted her the measure of patience she requested, but he would not wait forever. Anduin heard her steps and ceased pacing. He turned to face her, his blue eyes regarding her motionless face. Then he dropped his gaze to the tray she carried. So, right now, Anduin is in prison. He's in the maw. He's imprisoned in the maw, like so many souls before him. And so it's kind of painting the picture of what's going on. He's there. He's looking at someone who's emotionless. And something that he's a very passionate character, which we'll come to find out. I'm going to put on my glasses. Because I'm like, okay. Blood Elf reading time. Needs glasses. Okay. Okay. I find myself wondering what that is and where you obtained it. Do you think you're the only mortal in Shadowlands? His eyes widened slightly. So my friends are still here. You're sleeping, Sylvanas. Sylvanas continued down the stairs. Not at all. I told you before, no more secrets, no more lies. I do try to think the best of people, but I lost hope in you even before the war. That surprised her, but she did not show it. This is not a place for hope, little lion, but it's a place for reason. Overly gentle and trusting you may be, but I do not think you a fool. I see. You're going to attempt to convince me that I should help the jailer destroy the cycle of life and death. He laughed softly, shaking his head. No, I'm certainly not the fool here. Sylvanas had reached the invisible border of Anduin's prison. She could enter and exit as she wished, and the tray of food and water passed easily through the barrier. She knew he had not had water for a day, had been denied food even longer. Yet Anduin simply glanced at the food, then back at her with narrow eyes. Sylvanas pushed her irritation and bit back a sharp retort. Then, to his visible surprise, she sat on the stone floor and cocked an eyebrow at him. Eat. I do not need to resort to poison. Any harm I wish to do, you would not be able to prevent. No. So this was how it was going to be. It was fine with her. He was quite literally a captive audience, and she had come to say much. I told you before, we wish you to join us willingly. I know you have empathy and compassion. That has been a weakness for you, but also a strength. So I will tell you how it was that I came to be the jailer's partner, and why I think you should be too. I will share with you the things I have shared with no one before. It cost her nothing. Anduin would serve, or he would be used. Either way, Any words spoken within the dark halls would never be shared with another mortal soul, not when her victory was so close at hand. And Anduin cocked his head and looked at her searchingly. As if mocking her, he sat, somehow graceful, if clanking. In his armor he reached for the water, toasted her, and drank. Go on then, Sylvanas Windrunner. Tell me these truths you have never shared. It would seem I have nothing but time. So as you can see, he's trapped in the maw, and we can definitely take a visit to the maw after the storm passes in Pandaria. And go visit it, because Anduin at this point is trapped in there, and he didn't have to give up anything to find this exclusive information. So he sees it also as an opportunity to get the backstory on things. So this is part 1. Part 1, and with love and courage, Varith Windrunner, and chapter 1. Let me see, Verisa begged. The balcony walls, white and curving as the throat of a swan, were too tall for her to peer over, and Sylvanas sighed. She cast a final longing look at the crowd, milling below, then darted back into their chambers for a stool. As Verisa happily clambered atop it, Sylvanas returned her attention to the scene. Their parents did host some gatherings. Father said it was prudent to do so from time to time, but they were usually small affairs, while Lord Varith Windrunner was one of a king's ancestrian's most trusted advisors, and his wife Larissa was the Ranger General of Silvermoon. Lesser nobles like the ostentatious Lord Salthariel threw much more lavish celebrations, but Larissa had little patience with pretense and politics, and their quality brilliant father's idea of a fine evening was a glass of wine, a good book, and candles to read by. But today everything was different. Some of those gathered at the base of the spire were nobility, like the Windrunners. Others would have once been considered commoners, but their athleticism, agility, and most uncanny skills in marksmanship and tracking had elevated them to another sort of nobility. Certainly, Sylvanas and her sisters had been raised with respect for and almost awe of the Farstriders, and thus far Sylvanas had seen. Nothing to disabuse her of the notion that they were worthier of respect than someone who had simply been born with a title. She had seen many of the Farstriders already for one reason or another, but they had usually come at the Ranger General's request and interacted little with the rest of the family. Sylvanas was most familiar with Lorthimer Thorin, perhaps because of his white hair. He was one of the few elves who looked older than they were, and he bore himself with the same quiet, elegant dignity that Sylvanas saw in her father. Another Sylvanas had met with a relative newcomer, Halderon Brightwing. He had a cheerful grin and unruly dark blonde hair, and he always greeted her and Verisa if they were present. Like Halderon, the petite Jiri was also a relative newcomer, and clearly quite young if her obvious excitement and wonder at the spire was any indication. The blue-black color of Ranger Beralthus' hair made him stand out in the sea that was overwhelmingly gold and silver. Beyond the crowd, Lieutenant Helios spoke quietly to Rangers. Let the villain, and Celisa, while Ranger Tom Thurin waited impatiently for Helios' attention. Telrisar, Rillian, Uric, Sunchaser, Ilaria's friend Verena, So many of them. Sylvanas' heart was racing. She was so excited for what was to transpire that she might as well be undergoing the test. Not her big sister, Ilaria, who stood beside her mother in silence. Ordinarily, the resemblance between mother and eldest daughter was uncanny. They had the same lean frame, though Ilaria was still somewhat gawky and coltish, long legs, hair that flowed like melted gold down their backs. The same curve of the mouth when they smiled, but now Larissa's belly was round and full, the child growing within, due to make its happy appearance sometime in the next few weeks. In this moment, neither woman smiled. What was about to happen was far too serious. Sylvanas watched Larissa, turned to Ilaria and nod. As the two stepped forward, the Farstriders spread out into a circle with mother and daughter in the center. The Ranger General's voice was strong and clear, used to uttering commands in the heart of battle and to having them be obeyed. It carried easily as she addressed the elite unit of the finest rangers in the entire kingdom. When I was a young woman, my mother Ilaria trained me, the eldest child, to become a ranger general, as her mother had been before her. Now my daughter, whom I've named after she who bore me, wishes to prove her worthiness and begin formal training, so that all may know that both Ilaria and I understand the duty and importance of the position of Ranger General. I have set her a challenge. Larissa turned to her daughter. There was no softening of the older woman's mien as she spoke. Sylvanas Windrunner, are you willing to do what is necessary to lead the Farstriders in times of both peace and war? I am, Ilaria's voice, usually deep for one so young, betrayed no emotion. Then, this is your challenge. Listen well. A spring spa lynx has been identified and tagged as your target. Its known territory ranges from Golden Mist Village to Farstrider Enclave. You must find it, slay it with a single arrow, field dress it, and bring the pelt to me before the last ray of light fades. If you fail any of these charges, you fail the test. The Ranger General presented a single arrow to Ilaria. Here is your arrow. May it fly true. It was one of Larissa's own, uniquely fletched in the colors of green representing the Farstriders, gold, one of the Windrunners, and one of Larissa's legendary battles. Ilaria hesitated just an instant before accepting it. Most wouldn't have noticed it, but Sylvanas knew her big sister well and frowned slightly. Ilaria was a quietly confident young woman, a superlative shot, and an untiring tracker when needed be. This should be easy. Spring paws were dangerous to the inexperienced, yes, but all the Windrunner daughters had begun training the instant they were strong enough to pull back the string on a child's bow. So why was Ilaria worried? Perhaps it was simple nervousness that wasn't an ordinary hunt. To fail before not just the Ranger General, but the entire unit of Farstriders would be humiliating. Ilaria placed the arrow in her empty quiver. Sylvanas thought it looked lonely, with none of its fellows surrounding it. Now Larissa offered Ilaria a knife. It was beautiful, its blade broad and sharp, as long as Ilaria's hand. The hilt was leather wrapped with golden threads. This is your skinning knife, Larissa said. Use it only for its task. Do not use it to attack your quarry. I will examine the pelt afterwards, and I will know if you do. Ilaria nodded, accepting the knife and slipping it into its sheath. Finally, Larissa placed a small sack in her daughter's hands. Water, bread, and dried meat, she said, enough for a single meal. If you grow hungry, You are permitted to gather food. Ilaria fastened the pouch securely to her belt. A small warm hand, slightly sticky with melon juice, slipped into Sylvanas's. Still not eye to eye with her sister, even on a stool, Barisa asked with a furrowed brow, "Is Lady's son going to be all right?" "Of course," Sylvana replied, squeezing her hand. "Ilaria is going to be just fine. It's only a spring's paw. I bet even you could bring down one of those." Her eyes lit up. "You think so?" "Well, maybe not right this minute, but very soon." Beaming, Varisa returned her attention to the crowd below them. Larissa placed her hands on her eldest daughter's shoulders, though the gestures were not affectionate, but firm. "If you succeed, we will begin the training." Ilaria squared her shoulders. "Spring paw, I name you prey." It was a formal phrase, the Farstrider equivalent of a vow. Larissa stepped back and brought a fisted hand to her heart in the Farstrider salute. Immediately after, the others did it so as well. With such perfect coordination that Sylvanas heard but one single thump as the hands met chests, Ilaria flipped the hood over the shining gold of her hair, turned to the forest, and strode forward. The circle of hunters opened to release her, and there was silence until her slender form was swallowed by the trees. Barisa leaped from the stool towards Sylvanas with perfect trust that her sister would catch her. Sylvanas did so, hugging her tight and then sitting her down gently while musing her soft, silvery hair. A thought crossed the older girl's mind, and she could not hide a mischievous smile. "Come, let's talk to the Farstriders while we wait for Ilaria." They descended the ramp as fast as Varisa's little legs could manage, Sylvana still holding her hand. The perfect circle of Farstriders had now dissolved into smaller clusters of individuals. Some were partaking of the fare, arranging on small tables, others talking among themselves. Varath had been standing beneath the balcony, keeping courtesy out of the way while watching his daughter's ceremony. Now he moved forward, hands outstretched to claim his wife's. He squeezed them reassuringly. Larissa squeezed back, then let out a sigh and released them. Sylvanas observed that it was only when she was with her husband that the Ranger General allowed herself to relax. Barisa scurried over to their parents, and Varath bent to scoop her up. Sylvanas, though, was far more interested in the Farstriders than her family. She had left her bow at the base of the ramp. Now she had it up, slung it over her shoulder with feigned nonchalance, and headed straight for Halderon. Lord Thamar and Jariri. They turned at her approach. I'm going to take a quick water break. I need water. 1 second. Mana and to not be AFK in the game because I don't want to get logged out. Okay. There we go. Oh, it's still raining in Pandaria. All right. Lady Sylvanas, Lord Thamar said, and inclined his head. His brows rose in impressed surprise. "You have traded bows since the last time I saw you, and traded quite well." It was true the last time Lord Thamar had come to the spire, Sylvanas was still training with a child's bow. She had been presented this one on her most recent birthday and learned that Larissa had arranged for one of the famed bowers of Quilthalas to craft it. It had been carved from dark wood, polished till it gleamed, and inlaid with swirls of gold that spelled out her name. It was beautiful, yes, she said, trying to sound casual, but what's more important is that the draw is smooth as silk, and the valley nice and comfortable. Care to see me shoot? Not at the moment, no, Lorthamar said. I'm sure you're quite good. You know, it is said your mother showed promise from a young age as well. Many here were present at the Battle of 7 Arrows, and they still speak with wonder at her skill on that day. It wasn't quite hero worship in her eyes. Lorthamar was much too grounded, but he had regarded Larissa with the deepest respect for a moment, then turned back to Sylvanas. You have her steady hand, he said, smiling slightly, and I imagine you'll be just as fine an archer. The Battle of 7 Arrows was a wonderful story, all the better for being true, but Sylvanas had heard it brought up so often it was all but meaningless to her now. Well, she replied, hiding her disappointment, I bet you will be telling me stories about me when I join the Farstriders. Lorthamar inclined his head courteously, but Halderon smothered a smile. That seems a way off. Not that far, Sylvanas shot back. You're hardly ancient. Barathel tried to cover his smirk. She has you there, Lorthamar said. Sylvanas, we are all waiting for Ilaria right now. No one wants to leave until she returns. Why not? Sylvanas wondered. Ilaria had a lengthy list of tasks to accomplish that would surely take several hours. Tracking the animal, dispatch it with an arrow, skin it, and return? Nevertheless, she had seen her father's diplomacy in action enough to know when not to press a point. Besides, if Lorthamar was correct, none of the Farstriders would be leaving anytime soon, which meant she could talk to all of them. They were the kingdom's main military force, with few citizens were more respected than they. She wished that she could at least see them shooting, but she would likely learn a great deal just by talking and listening to them. The hours passed. By the time the midday meal was served, Sylvanas had spoken with every single one of her heroes. She was now hungry and growing bored with the whole thing. Why did Ilaria's trial have to be so lengthy? Larissa was now seated, rubbing her enormous belly absently as she gazed where Ilaria had gone. Sylvanas approached her father, who was sitting on the grass with Varissa. Head in his lap, he put a finger to his lips, and Sylvanas nodded. Varissa, she knew, had been up all night, refusing to sleep out of sheer excitement. Sylvanas, too, had not slept, though she was less obvious about it. She pushed away any drowsiness and chewed on a slice of bread and cheese as she sank down next to Verath. How long do you think this will go on? Sylvanas whispered. Your mother was generous with her requirements, Verath said. Ilaria will need the whole day. His gaze, like his wife's, was where Ilaria had last been seen. Sylvanas made a face. So what am I supposed to do? Wait, he said simply, or whatever else you wish, my dear. You are not a Farstrider. You may come and go as you please. I just might then, Sylvanas replied. She followed her father's gaze. You do think Ilaria will succeed. She excels at all she has been asked to do, Verath said. That's not an answer. No, it's not, her father said. That's a good response. It's like he wants to say that she's, obviously knows what she's doing, but at the same time, it's like he's saying that he he can't promise that she'll make it back, because that's really the ball's in her court. She has to figure out if she's able to. I like you better as a father than a diplomat, Sylvanas said. She had learned long ago that there was no point in pressing him when he put on his advisor robes, as Ilaria called it. It is fortunate that I am both, he replied with a grin and a wink. This was true many times. Sylvanas had seen smoothly interject himself into conversations between Larissa and others when things began to grow heated. Because she knew she wouldn't get anything more from him, Sylvanas grunted in exasperation and rose, polishing off the light meal and reaching for a delicate spun glass, a chalice of fruit nectar to wash it down. She went to family armory and grabbed a quiver and a handful of arrows. She was itching to jump from bow to bow of the beautiful golden-leafed, white-barked trees, to test her own skill at moving silently and shooting cleanly while her sister was doing the same. Sylvanas made certain her departure wasn't noticed, and once she was out of sight of the gathered forest riders, she veered back towards the direction Ilaria had been heading. Something was going on, and Sylvanas wanted to know what. She felt the tension in the group, tamped down but present. Lord Thamar's words were curious, and her father's evasiveness had only increased her suspicions. Even Larissa seemed anxious, and that was highly unusual. Sylvanas, just like her sister, had no idea which specific spring paw had been selected as Ilaria's quarry. How would Ilaria go about finding it? That task alone seemed impossible and doomed to failure. The practical thing would be to start with the pride that was closest to the Windrunner spire. Her mother would not have selected a beast as far away as say, the West Sanctum, not if Larissa wanted her daughter to succeed. And Sylvanas was well aware the Ranger General was determined that Ilaria would fulfill her birthright. So the closest then. Tough the day was clear. It had rained last night. The forest smelled of damp, clean earth, and Sylvanas, knowing exactly what to look for, found traces of Ilaria's passing. You are easy to track, Lady Sun, she murmured. But there was no reason for Ilaria to waste precious time attempting to hide her path. Sylvanas continued to follow Ilaria's trail, then froze. The boot prints began to be spaced farther apart, and only the toes were now visible. Ilaria had been running, and Sylvanas' heart contracted when she saw why. The largest spring paw prints she had ever seen began to appear alongside Ilaria's. Her sister was no longer predator, but prey, and the beast who hunted her was enormous. Sylvanas began to run. The words pounded in her brain. Everyone is waiting for Ilaria to return. She excels at all she has been asked to do, and her response, that's not an answer, except it had been, hadn't it? Her father had known everyone had known except for her and Verissa. A sudden burst of anger lent her speed. Her ears caught the sound of something crashing through the underbrush. An unmistakable snarling roar joined the noise. Something large and angry was barreling towards her. Distance, I need distance. Sylvanas leaped up, caught an overhanging branch, and pulled herself up, climbing high enough so that the spring paw couldn't pull her down if she missed. Her heart thumped in her chest, and her breathing was quick, and she swiftly pulled an arrow from her quiver and knocked her bow. When the animal burst into view, Sylvanas gasped. The outside prince had told her it would be large, but to see it, this had to be the one they called Mauler, the one rumored to have developed a taste for elven flesh. She could well believe it. For an instant, panic almost overwhelmed her, but then a sudden calm descended, precise, detached, cold. She noticed so many things in the space of a heartbeat: its size, its speed, its yellow teeth and claws that tore the earth as it ran, the lone arrow in its side, too far from the heart to have killed it, the blood dripping down its golden fangs from the arrow, and numerous cuts that looked to have been made by a hunting knife. That it was chasing prey, not fleeing on the ground, but in a tree, and Ilaria was in the branches. Her face was flushed with exertion, and she clung to the branches for dear life. Sylvanas realized with horror her sister had made a dreadful miscalculation. Ilaria wasn't high enough to escape the sort of leap a spring paw the size of Mauler could make. Was making. Sylvanas' arrow pierced the lynx's right eye, emerging clotted with blood at the base of its skull. He dropped his paws, churning as his body spasmed, then lay motionless. After the cacophony of the chase, the forest seemed unnaturally still. Birds were silent, too afraid to resume their songs. Even the wind did not dare to rustle the leaves. Sylvanas' mouth was dry from panting. Her body trembled from the release of tension as tight as a bowstring. She took a breath, steadied herself, and jumped from the tree. Ilaria climbed down as well. In silence, the two sisters stared down at the beast. Finally, Sylvanas spoke. "Did you know it was this one?" Ilaria shook her golden head. She couldn't tear her eyes from the corpse. One had clutched her bow, and the other gore-covered knife. It was only then that Sylvanas realized that Ilaria's leg was bleeding. "You're hurt!" Sylvanas exclaimed, trying to tear off her sleeve for a bandage as she moved towards her sister. The mauler had missed the major artery. To her confusion, Ilaria drew back. Her eyes bored angrily into her sister's. "Don't touch me!" she snapped. Sylvanas blinked. "You're wounded. Haven't you done enough?" What I've done is save your life, Ilaria." Bewilderment and hurt turned into hot anger. "A thank you would be nice." "I'll take care of it myself." Ilaria wrenched off her cloak, tossing it down to the forest floor angrily and stabbing at it with her dagger, as she had tried to do to the mauler after her single arrow did nothing but enrage the beast. Sylvanas gasped lightly, comprehension dawning. She had intervened, and now Ilaria had failed her test? But she failed before I even shot, Sylvanas thought. Ilaria hadn't killed them with one arrow. "Ilaria," she began, more calmly this time. "Even before Be quiet!" Ilaria was shouting now, and tore furiously at the cloak, ripping off a strip of dark green fabric, venting her anger and shame on the inanimate object as she wrapped it tightly around her wounded leg. Sylvanas stood by, silent, less obeying Ilaria's request than being too frustrated and hurt to speak. Ilaria tentatively put weight on the injured leg and winced, hissing. Again, Sylvanas moved to help. Again, Ilaria halted her. Ilaria took her bow, her beautiful bow that had been given to her only a few hours ago, and used it for a cane as they moved slowly towards home. "What happened?" Larissa's face appeared to be composed. Only her children could see the fire of anger in their mother's eyes. "I missed the kill," Ilaria said quietly, trying and failing to keep her face as expressionless as her mother's. "Obviously, as I see no unmarred pelt before me." Ilaria's face twitched slightly. "The mauler is at least dead, I hope." "He is," Ilaria replied. Sylvanas remained quiet. Let their mother assume Ilaria had put the beast down. It would go easier on both of them. The older girl's gaze darted to Sylvanas for a moment, then flickered back at Larissa. But I cannot claim the kill. I was treed. And it was Sylvanas who shot him. Sylvanas' eyes grew wide. What had Ilaria just done? Now their mother's simmering fury was turned on Sylvanas. Is this true? Sylvanas wanted badly to lie. All Ilaria needed to do to avoid the worst of the storm was remain silent. But she had volunteered unrequested information and now made them both clear targets of their mother's displeasures. Lying would only make things worse. The young Windrunner straightened and met her mother's eyes evenly. It is. Ilaria's life was in danger. It took the shot. I took the shot when I had it. I see, Larissa said. So you took even that away from her. Sylvanas felt her face grow hot. The monster was. You do not know what would have happened. Larissa's statement cut off Sylvanas' protest with brutal sharpness. Ilaria did indeed fail, and she did not kill the beast with one arrow, but she might have killed it regardless. She might have returned and requested another opportunity to prove herself against an unequally dangerous creature. There are subtleties in these things, Sylvanas, that you do not appreciate. Perhaps you did save her life. We will never know. But all here do know you robbed Ilaria of any opportunity to handle the situation by herself, cheated her out of her victory, and shamed her before the people she was born to lead. Sylvanas bit her lip hard to keep from bursting into tears. Not because she was hurt, though. But because she was so terribly angry. Angry that her sister had unknowingly been tasked with doing something so dangerous. Angry that Ilaria had resented her for trying to help. Angry that no one here seemed to understand that Larissa might have been planning funeral rites for her eldest daughter instead of publicly embarrassing her. She opened her mouth to shout, "It's not fair," when a calm voice spoke. "Ranger General," Barat said, speaking with the greatest respect to his wife. "As you say, there are things Sylvanas is too young yet to fully understand. If you had instructed her to stay here, I'm certain she would have obeyed." Sylvanas was not at all certain, but she was wise enough to stay silent. "I will take her and Verissa out for some air while you resolve the situation with your Farstriders, and I will put this event in the proper context for her." Larissa visibly calmed at her husband's words. She said nothing, but nodded, and the angry furrow of her brow relaxed ever so silently. So obviously Sylvanas is a daddy's girl. Like me, I like Kid and Pop. We're just like, yes. This is why I like reading this story, because you find out things that, you don't know. Like, I didn't know Sylvanas was a daddy's girl. But her dad is obviously advocating for her, and I really like that. Kids, aren't we all? Exactly. It's a blood elf thing, It's a blood elf thing. Okay. Now I'm trying to figure out where Okay. Okay, there. It was not the first time that their father had gracefully inserted himself between his daughters and their mother. It would likely not be the last. Larissa had a quick temper and a sharp tongue, but she was also fast to forgive and forget. Usually, Sylvanas suspected that this time it would take more than a duration of jaunt to Silvermoon for her mother and Ilaria to sort things out, and perhaps even more time for the air to clear between the Ranger General and her middle daughter. Sylvanas could not suppress a glower as she prepared her Hawkstrider, while her father hoisted a giggling Verissa atop his Queldore steed. As the heed groomed, Talvas held the reins and smiled benevolently at the littlest Windrunner. His horse, with its coat of gleaming white-black mane and tail, and distinctive single curved horn, was bestowed by King Asterion only upon those of high rank or exceptional distinction. Each of her parents had one. Varath the stallion, Parley, and Larissa the mare Aeroflight before Varissa was born. It had been Sylvanas who perched in front of Varath, and they rode. Parley sensing the need for gentleness and bearing the children of his master without faltering. Now that was Varissa's place. Sylvanas loved her hawkstrider, whom she had named Snap, and been proud of herself the day she finally rode solo. But sometimes she missed the warm comfort of her father literally at her back. Today was one of those times. Snap's long taloned legs moved swiftly, and Varath slowed Parley's gait to a gentle canter so as not to outpace the large avian. Sylvanas fumed quietly, and her father did not press her. They had passed Windrunner village and the sanctum of the moon, and were well into Tranquillion when Sylvanas finally spoke. What mother did was not fair. Which part of what she did? Her father asked. Any of it. Letting Ilaria think she was supposed to kill or an ordinary spring paw, demanding one arrow and no knife marks, not making sure someone was watching her, and, she said, saving the worst affront for last, being angry at me for saving my sister's life. Varath nodded, but didn't reply at once. Then he said, Your mother needs to be tough on Ilaria. Do you know why? Because she likes to? Sylvanas thought. Ain't that the truth? But even before her thought had truly formed, she knew it was too harsh a judgment. I don't know, she said honestly. The position of Ranger General is crucial to the defense of our kingdom. It is the only hereditary position other than the monarchy itself. It's always passed from the Ranger General to one of their children. And for the last few thousand years, the Ranger General of Silvermoon has always been the eldest child of the Windrunner. I know all this, Sylvanas said, sulking. Yes, but you are not using that knowledge to understand the situation. Gentle as it was still one of those sharpest rebukes Sylvanas had heard from her father, and her cheeks reddened. Close is lolling, kid is lolling, we're all lolling over here. I've been in that situation. Like, for me, I'm like that too. If I get really mad, my cheeks get pink too. I'm like, it's the Irish in me coming out. I was like, so she said, anxious to do better. If she wanted to, Mama could have given Ilaria the title, even if Ilaria is a bad hunter. She could, and what would happen if she did? The Farstriders would be angry and accuse her of... Sudden comprehension dawned. Mama has to push Ilaria hard, so the Farstriders can see she was not only born to this position, but truly deserves of it. If Mama is so soft on her, people would think she was playing favorites. Exactly, right? Her father replied, and that is a burden Ilaria should not have to carry. Simply leading the Farstriders well will be challenging enough. It was a measure of confidence in Ilaria's success that your mother sent her after the Mauler. Varath continued, it was less a test of those specific skills than to see how Ilaria would behave in the face of something genuinely dangerous. It was never about passing or failing. Larissa had faith Ilaria would survive, and regardless of what happened, Ilaria's actions would expose both her strengths and her weaknesses. Knowing these, Larissa could help her improve on the first and eliminate the second. An evaluation, if you like. Sylvanas' heart, until this moment beating rapidly with anger and resentment, suddenly felt heavenly in her chest, and understanding dawned. So, missing the shot didn't mean Ilaria failed. No, it did not, her father said, and his voice was gentle and filled with sympathy. She didn't look at him, but she felt his kind gaze on her. But when I shot Mahler, I ruined the test. Yes. Sylvanas sat with this realization for a while, thinking her way through it, recalling every moment of the incident. Her mother's cutting words came back to her. There are subtleties in these things, Sylvanas, which you do not appreciate. Finally, she said, Mother should have told me. And Kitten says, yeah, I cry when I get super mad. Yeah, it's like emotions, floods of emotions, right? Like even right now, when I was talking about, being a daddy's girl type of thing, like even that like emotion got my eyes glossy. Just because I get, I just feel very passionate. When I feel passionate, I also get teary-eyed. And Close says, I'm glad I'm here today. All of you, as are you, Close. And we're so happy to have you part of our family, our Warcraft family. And Kitten Pop is also a WoW player. And Kitten meet Close. Close is also a Warcraft player. She plays the mage. She's the one I was telling you about that plays mage on Lich King. And then Kitten Pop plays retail, but she's now recently is on an EU server. Kitten says, oh, poor thing, right? I feel for her. I feel for her. She doesn't know anybody. She's like, essentially she doesn't understand why she thinks she saved her sister's life, but didn't realize that, the intentions of this was not necessarily to pass the test, but it was to gain the respect of the people that one day she was going to serve. She was going to be their leader, and in order to be a good leader, you have to be respected. Deck Cherry says, same here. When I'm really upset, I go, we're all teary. Okay. It's just part of our life. We're very in tune with ourselves. Nothing wrong with that. Pretty sure I get my teary eyes from my dad because we'll literally be watching a show and he'll like, hold on, this is making me cry. Like, okay, Dad. Plus, it's so nice to have you here. All the love. I feel like her mother should have let her in on this test, maybe. Right? Or at least maybe had a family meeting without the the sister. I don't know. It's hard to say because sisters, sometimes siblings can't keep a secret from each other or from anyone. Let's be real. And so I understand too. It's like they wanted it to be the most authentic, but at the same time, maybe instead of telling Sylvanas, they should have just said, "Hey, you can't go out." Like when she wanted to go do something, they should have just said, "Hey, you can't go out when she's out training." That's all they had to do. Just restrict her. But then again, Sylvanas said she doesn't know for sure if she would have actually stayed. So. Kid says, I don't know, or keep her at the house preoccupied. True. Give her something to do. She's a kid. She needs to be entertained. And she's used to entertaining herself outside. So for her, she's like, I don't want to be bored to death. Kid says, oh, your dad sounds lovely. He is. He's hilarious. You guys will love my dad. He's very, very friendly, very warm. He's like that. Oh, I was about to get logged out. Good thing I checked. There's literally 10 seconds left. And look, the rain cleared. And Close says they could have just explained she can't help with the test. True. Or that, just be explicit. Be like, look, you can't help with the test. But I feel like Sylvanas, as soon as she saw the giant paw print, she felt a sense of duty. She was she saw her she didn't see her sister taking a test anymore. She saw, I don't want my sister to die. So I think in this situation too, like, letting her go outside is like where things went wrong, because that's where she saw the paw print. Kitten says, I would have given her maybe her own task since she's headstrong. True. That's a good point. But then would she have still found the paw print? Because the paw print was the biggest one that they've ever seen. And apparently the smaller has been known to eat blood elves. Apparently this thing's been causing havoc for blood elves who aren't part of the Windrunner family. Plus says, or told her to train in another town. Oh, that's a good point. Town and come back in the evening. I like that. Like, go take the portal to Orgmire. Go somewhere. Go do something. Or maybe have like her other sibling or a friend go with her. I mean, she's a Windrunner. She's like known in the village. There's other kids her age. Kitten says, yeah, how do you keep her from running to save her sister at that point? True. Like, if it was my sister and I saw like she was gonna life or death situation, at that point I feel like I would just forget what the test is. Especially at a young age. I wouldn't even think like, oh, I don't want her to fail the test. I would be like, I don't want her to die. To me, I don't care about what people think. I don't want her to die, you know? But I do really like the idea of sending her off to another town. Because then she could still be outdoors, but she's less likely to you know, get, find the paw print, find her sister, intrude on it. So, let's see. So we left off at her mother should have told me. So similar to what Close was saying. I agree. She looked at him, pleased and surprised. You do? You are a young woman now, Sylvanas, no longer a child. Larissa should have told you the importance of the test, and you would have understood. Would you not? I would, Sylvanas said, finally looking over him, but I still think that's a cruel thing to have done to Ilaria, and I'm not sorry I shot. You weren't there, father. Spring's paws can climb, and Ilaria could not get high enough in time to escape him. I know I did the right thing. He chuckled, his eyes bright. Right and wrong, just like fair and unfair, are highly subjective. But in the end, there's only one thing that matters. She cocked her head, and that is, you acted out of love and with courage. Everyone there, including the Ranger General herself, understands that. I don't think so. Not the way she looked at me. If not now, then she will realize it soon, just as I do. Sylvanas' chest began to ease, and she smiled gratefully at her father. He understood her, even when she got into scraps and trouble, even when she disobeyed or did something wrong. He knew her. He knew her heart and her intentions, and always remembered these, even when he was the one to dole out the reprimands. Sylvanas turned her face up to the blue sky and took a deep breath of clean, healing scent of the forest. I wish you hadn't told Mother we were going to Silvermoon. She was not over fond of the elven capital. It was too large, too bright, too oh so very crimson and gold. Statues were everywhere, and the cost of any given noble's outfit could have fed a small village. I would much rather have gone exploring with you. Now is not the time to add an extra concern to your mother's plate. Sylvanas scowled. He was correct. Sometimes you're too stuffy, she muttered, and he laughed. I'll tell you what. We will go to Silvermoon, just as I promised your mother. But we can stop along the way. Sylvanas turned in her saddle to look at him, her mood shifting almost at once. Our favorite spot? Our favorite spot. Can we stay until the fireflies come out? Not today, dear one, but we can stay for a little while. They exchanged grins, and Sylvanas felt as though a shadow passing in front of the sun had finally retreated. The silence that fell was now companionable, and Sylvanas pushed back her hood to let the wind play with her pale yellow locks. Lady Moon Ilaria had dubbed her. Ilaria herself was Lady Sun, and Verisa Little Moon. Sylvana had pointed out her hair was still technically blonde, albeit pale, and Ilaria had replied, "It's closer to white than gold. And besides, would you rather be Lady Moon or Little Sun?" Little Sun. Naturally, that's a good way to put it. Naturally, Sylvanas had opted for the former, thus saddling Verisa with Little Moon. Soon, a new Windrunner would join the family. Idly Sylvanas wondered what the color of the child's hair would be. White like their father's and the moon, gold like Larissa and the sun, black like the night sky, red like the hawkstrider. The thought amused her. She gave her father a sly look, bluttered, "Race you!" and signaled, Snap to run full out. "Race, race, race!" shouted Verisa, happily digging her fingernails into Parlay's mane. Varath, as always, gave Sylvanas a head start, but she expected him, as always, to win. "I'll never let you win, my daughter," he told her once. "You wouldn't like that." He was right. She would lose the race, but that wasn't the point of it. The point was joy. The point of it was joy. The favorite spot beloved by the Windrunner family would not look like anything special to the casual observer, but to them, it represented many happy memories, stretching all the way back to the days when a strong-willed, passionate woman had paid suit to the court's rising star, a youth with a tact and insight of one much older than his age, but who still had a lover's heart. "I was always a child of the city," Varath had told Sylvanas the first time he and Larissa had brought their three children to the small grassy spot next to the river. Ilaria was knee-deep in the cold, clean water. Sylvanas was in her father's lap, and their mother was nursing the infant Verisa. "I fell in love with your mother and the forest at the same time. In a way, it was like falling in love with one single beautiful, vibrant thing." Varath regarded his wife, who lifted her head, feeling his gaze, and smiled softly at him. Sylvanas had looked from one to the other, not quite understanding the unspoken words between them, but knowing them to be loving ones, and knowing as well that she was safe. Today it was Sylvanas who was wading in the water, gasping at the bone-deep cold and laughing as small, silvery fish nibbled at her toes. Verisa sat on a sun-warmed rock, attempting to make a flower crown, mangling it horribly and not caring in the slightest. Varath had stretched his lanky legs on the grass and was watching the soft white clouds when he frowned and sat up, still staring skyward. Sylvanas turned to look, too. Craning her neck and shielding her eyes, there was a small speck. No, 2 specks, silhouetted in the sun, that were drawing closer, their wings beating as they approached. "Lord Varath!" "Halderon!" her father called, as Halderon, Yuri, and the Dragonhawks approached. Although she was clearly trying to control her emotions, the normally smiling Yuri was pale and almost frightened. "My lord, you must return to the spire at once," Jerry said. "Lady Larissa has gone into labor." Sylvanas had never seen her father look so distressed. "But the child isn't due for several weeks." "Apparently someone neglected to inform the child," Halderon retorted. His effort at lightening the mood was received with worried silence as Varath handed Verisa to him. He settled the girl safely in front of him, while Jerry slipped off her dragon hawk, and Varath and Sylvanas climbed atop it. Sylvanas was not particularly interested in children other than her younger sister, nor had she given much thought to having children of her own. Ilaria was the only one who needed to produce the future Ranger General. She sat behind her father, arms around his waist, resting her cheek on his back. Barath's reaction had unsettled her, and she was doing her utmost not to worry. Her mother had doubtless summoned some of the finest healers in the land the moment it became apparent that the newest addition to their family was determined to join it ahead of schedule. Sylvanas and her father leaped off the dragonhawks almost before the creatures were close enough to land. Halderon handed Varisa back to her father, and Varath and Sylvanas raced up the stairs. A sensitive child, Varisa had picked up on the tension and started crying. The moment they departed, much to Halderon's consternation, and she now was sobbing at full tilt. There was no sound from above of another child crying its first breath. Sylvanas did not think she had ever been truly afraid of anything in her life, but suddenly fear locked her in its cold grasp. She was clumsy as she ran. Despite his weeping burden, Varath reached the room before Sylvanas, vanishing into the quarters he and his wife shared. Sylvanas stumbled in a second after, bracing for the worst. She saw instead a sight so beautiful it could have been a painting hung in Sunfury spire. Warm sunlight streamed in through the open casement window, bathing her mother and the bundle she bore in white gold. The transition at the top was made of stained glass, casting its own rainbow hues. Varath cupped Larissa's flushed face in his hands, and as Sylvanas stepped inside, relief making her weak, her parents kissed for a long while. Sweet moment, then pressed their foreheads together. Tears were on Varath's cheeks, yet Sylvanas had never seen him smile with such joy. Ilaria leaned against the wall, smiling herself, and another worry Sylvanas hadn't realized she'd been carrying fell away. The new arrival, it would seem, already worked a minor miracle. If Ilaria's test was all but forgotten, Larissa pulled back from her husband's embrace, her hand still on his cheek. Everything's fine, she reassured her children. This little boy simply couldn't wait any longer. A boy? A brother for the three sisters? Sylvanas realized she'd simply assumed the baby would be a girl, but she was glad he wasn't. 4 girls would have been boring. Marisa had stopped crying and now wedged her way between the parents. Let me see. Had only half a day passed since she'd said that to Sylvanas, wanting to see Ilaria? It seemed like a lifetime ago. Sylvanas stepped from the doorway quietly to stand at the foot of the bed, wondering if this giddy elation filling the room would extend to her. Larissa turned her eyes toward Sylvanas, and her smile was warm and genuine. Would you like to hold him, Sylvanas? Sylvanas nodded. The lump in her throat stopped her from speaking. She reached down at Larissa, reached up, and gathered the small, warm bundle in her arms. The infant fidgeted, turning his head and dislodging part of the blanket that had been tucked around him. Sylvanas took a swift breath, and she finally beheld his face, her eyes wide and suddenly stinging with tears. He was perfect. A wisp of golden hair, bright as newly minted coins, adorned his head. His cheeks were pink as roses, and his deep blue eyes were fixed on her. It was, let me go and quickly look, okay. Nicole said, hello, a boy, what? Exactly right. It's funny because I'm one of three as well, all girls. So I laughed at that as well. I was like, that's so funny. A boy, another girl would be boring. Um, Joy and fierceness flooded her in a sudden burst as the world narrowed to this moment. This small being, and Sylvanas did not think she had ever cared about anything more than this confoundingly tiny bundle. Carefully, she shifted him so she could touch his face, his skin, so soft, so perfect. What's his name? Her words came out in an odd, hushed whisper. Larath, Larissa said. Larath, Sylvanas repeated, trying it out. As Verisa was, so was the baby's name, an amalgam of his mother's and father's. It rolled pleasingly off the tongue, and though it was, of course, impossible, Larath gurgled as if responding to it. Larath, one day, I'm going to show you your favorite spot. You can splash in the water, or dance with us, or just sit and watch the world like Father does. I can't wait to show you fireflies. She leaned over and kissed his smooth forehead, unmarred as yet by the sun or sorrow. As she drew back, the baby waved a chubby arm, and tiny fingers grasped a few strands of her hair. He likes your hair, Lady Moon, Ilaria said. Her voice was warm and soft. Everything Sylvanas thought was warm and soft right there, right here, right now. Well, Sylvanas replied, her voice still low and tinged with wonder, watching the infant's fascination with a simple lock of hair. He is golden-haired like you, Lady Sun, so I think he should be little Lord Sun. 2 suns, 2 moons, Verisa crowed, bouncing slightly. Hold him carefully, Sylvanas, Larissa said. You don't want to hurt him. Sylvanas recalled her father's words. I will never hurt you, ever, and no one else will either. With love and courage, I will keep you safe. And that is chapter 1. So I'm going to bookmark